Welcome to the Murali End. I'm Dominic Machado, and today I'm joined by the doyen of Sri Lankan cricket, Nick Brookes in South London, and by Estelle Vasudevan, the number one sports journalist in Sri Lanka in Colombo. We've got a lot to talk about today, a lot of goings on. We've got the announcement of the women's T20 squad. We've got the ongoing test against New Zealand, and we have two A tours wrapping. But before that, I just want to ask you to subscribe, to give us a follow on any platform you're listening on, whether that's Facebook, YouTube, or your podcast app. Subscribe to the newsletter. Nick just wrote a piece summing up the England tour. There'll be more stuff coming soon, especially in advance of the Women's World Cup. Also, if you're in need of a mortgage, get in touch with Mike Ward. Details below in the description. And please mention Murali Pod. Okay, so let's get started. We'll start with the big news coming out today, which was the announcement of the women's T20 squad, right? Sri Lanka, I believe, is the last team to announce their side. They kind of waited till the end of this A tour that's currently going on against Bangladesh. And I'll start by reading out who's in the side, okay? A lot of familiar names, but one big change that we'll get to. So Chamri Atapattu is captaining, Harshita Samaravikrama, Vishmi Gunaratna, Kavisha Dilhari, Nilakshi De Silva, Asani Pereira, Anushka Sanjeevani, Sachini Nisansala, Udeshika Prabodhini, Inoshi Fernando, Achini Kulasurya, Inoka Ranaweera, Shashini Gimhani, Amakanchana, Sugandhika Kumari. Okay, so the big news is that Inoka has been brought back after several months layoff from the T20 side. Estelle, what do you make of the move to bring Inoka in and of the squad as a whole?
I think it's a really good move. It's an important move because, she's been Sri Lanka's backbone, the backbone of that bowling attack for the last I don't know how many years, right? Before the batting got good, it's the likes of Inoka Ranaweera that kept that team kind of above water. So I'm really happy to see her back. I know someone had tweeted at me saying that I'd been complaining about her being left out so much, so I must be really happy. So I am quite happy to see her in the squad, especially because I feel like it doesn't really affect the squad negatively in any way because Kavya Kavindi is the player that she's replaced, right? So um, Kavya, if you look at how Sri Lanka have played and the team makeup, it's very, very unlikely that she would have gotten a game ahead of the three other medium pacers in that squad. So it almost felt like a waste of a spot having her there. But Inoka, it'll be interesting to see whether they fit her into the 11 and how they do that. But I'm happy to see her there, particularly because, conditions in Sharjah are expected to help the spinners, and she's got all the experience of bowling in those slow low kind of clammy conditions, right? So I think it's a good move. The squad overall, nothing unexpected. I think Inoka's inclusion was the only one that kind of took me by surprise because we didn't see her during the Asia Cup and we didn't see her in the games against Ireland. We don't know whether she was actually carrying an injury or she was being
Yeah.
rested because there was no communication regarding that, right? So, overall, I think it's not a, I mean, there aren't surprises in it. My only concern is maybe the batting because there's only seven batters in that squad. But I think we can discuss later on about whether there are other, batters kind of in the wings waiting to get
Mhm.
into the final 15 at the moment. I'm not sure there is anyone who would fit in. But yeah, overall the squad, nothing much unexpected except for Ranaveera, which I think is a sensible move to make.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, right? I think, Estelle, you've talked a lot about if there's a weakness in this bowling squad, it's the ability to take wickets, and Inoka is a wicket taker, right? So that is hopefully what they're thinking in bringing her in. So Nick, I want to ask, right? So the games are being played in Sharjah. That's or three of the four games I believe are being played in Sharjah. So that's a big advantage for Sri Lanka. Lots of knowledge inside the camp about how those wickets play and things like that. And I think, you'll be able to note from a historical perspective when Sri Lanka goes in with a settled 15 as opposed to one where half of the spots are debated, where we don't know who's going to come in, it usually bodes well for them. But Nick, what kind of strategy do you see them employing, particularly when it comes to spin bowling? Because you not only have, I believe 5 real spinners in the squad, but also the spin of Kavisha and Chamri
Yeah,
as
I
well.
mean, I think it's a really interesting. I agree with Estelle. I think bringing Inoka back is a really good move. We know that the UAE is going to be spin friendly, right? Whenever we've seen the IPL move there, we've seen a drastic change in the kind of scores that get posted and the people who end up taking wickets. So, I mean, 3 seamers in the squad seems like plenty to me. I think now the real decision Sri Lanka have is whether they go with 2 frontline seamers in the team, whether they play Shashini and Udishka, or whether they stack the team with spin and maybe just go with 1 seamer. I think they'll probably go with 2 seamers, 2 frontline spinners, and then they've got, as you say, Dom, the backup spin of Chamari and Kavisha. I think this team looks pretty well set up. As Estelle said, I mean, I guess the one major issue is that we know who the top 7 are going to be, and there's no spare batter. But that kind of has a little bit of a 96 feel about it, right? Where, like, yeah, it's those like 7 kind of experienced batters who've had a run going into the tournament. I think that we know that the top order is the big strength, right? And that Nilakshi Hassani kind of 5-6 area is maybe slightly has a more unproven feel about it, and the worry is if teams pick up 2-3 wickets in the power play, how Sri Lanka can then rebuild their innings. But yeah, I think spin friendly pitches. I like the look of the squad. Obviously, the top order of especially Chamri, Vishmi, Harshita. That's a big sort of top order, and girls coming into this tournament with a lot of confidence, right?
Absolutely. And I think Nick was talking about the spin friendly wickets. And something else we've talked about the podcast is that when you're playing on spin friendly wickets or low scoring pitches in general, the gap between the squads closes a little bit more. So Sri Lanka will be in a lot of dogfights where bowling tightly, keeping the runs down is going to be really, really helpful. And I think they have batters in the likes of Chamari and Vishmi and Harshita who know how to grind it out, right, in those tough pitches, can go and get that 50 that gets the side over the line. So I think that'll be really big. I think the one change, and we've discussed this as well, Estelle's brought this up, Amakanchana might come in. You could see her coming in at a number 7 for Hassani Pereira since she can hit. And if they're looking for some big hitting down the order, she could fill that role and also fulfill that medium pacer role. I think, again, it's going to depend on when they get to the pitches and seeing how many overs of spin can they bowl, because I think Sri Lanka will want to maximize that. One thing I wanted to kind of bring up here is Shashini Gimhani's inclusion in the team at 15 years old, right? Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, but she must be the youngest ever Sri Lankan to feature in
I'm
a
pretty
World Cup,
sure.
correct?
I don't think that there's been a
Yeah.
man who is anywhere near that young. The youngest I can think of is maybe in 1975, Anurag Ranasinghe, I think, was still at school. And then in 1979, they took a really young wicketkeeper, Sudath Pasquale, I think it was. But both of those guys, I think, were closer to 17, 18. So I'm pretty sure Shashini
Yeah.
gets that by a long shot. And I would have thought that she's the youngest person to represent Sri Lanka in cricket, right?
Yeah, she is. Yeah,
Yeah.
she is. Yeah.
And really
And
excited. She feels like a little
Akila is the other
who?
one.
Oh,
I said
Akila, of
Akila is the
course,
other one at
yeah.
17, right? Yeah,
But
yeah,
she feels like a
yeah.
kind of X Factor pick as well, right? And if you get a real
Mm.
rank turner, that maybe she could be thrown in and could do a bit of damage.
Yeah, I kind of feel like in a game like against Australia, I feel like that X factor, and maybe this is just the Sri Lankan in me talking, where we say, okay, we have this X factor, this mystery bowler, but people won't have seen her, right? And left arm wrist spinners are very rare in any form of the game, and especially in women's cricket, as far as
And she's
I'm
the only
aware
wrist
of.
spinner in the squad, right? Lots of
Um,
finger spinners, but
yeah,
Yeah.
lots of finger spinners. Yeah. And yeah, so there's a lot of good talent. It'll be a brilliant experience for her, anyways, regardless of if she plays or not. Um, and Estelle, do you think that just to kind of pick up on one of your points, say one of the batters gets injured, right, and they have to bring in someone from outside, who has looked the best on this A tour against Bangladesh? Who would probably be next in line for selection should someone go down?
Yeah, so Kaushini Nutyangana is traveling with the team as a reserve, right? And I think she was the one who they kind of used in that A. They were really looking at that in that A series because she batted at the top of the order in some of the games.
Yep.
Then she moved down, lower down in the order. Obviously, we didn't get to watch it. It wasn't live streamed, but just looking from the scores, doesn't seem like any of the batters really stood out. So it's it's just Nutyangana who they've got their eye on. From the little we've seen her in international cricket, I think she's a pretty good prospect as well. I mean,
Yep.
she is a bit of an aggressor. Um, Certainly, there are a couple of spots in that 11. A couple of players who haven't gotten runs at all over the last year or so, right? So possibly, if there's an injury, obviously one of them will have to be ruled out of the tournament for
Yeah.
them to bring Nutyangana in, but that will be the only kind of flexibility they have with their batting lineup. If not, like you mentioned, I think that's actually a really good point because bringing Amakanchana in would mean that then they don't have to play the two quicks. They can go with Udeshika and then bring in another spinner. I mean, it all depends on what they want, right? Because I find it hard to imagine that they would bring Inoka Ranaweera into the squad and then not play her. But if you look at the players in that squad, you're not dropping Sugantika Kumari or Inoshi Fernando, right? They've been very, very successful for Sri Lanka over the last year, particularly in the Asia Cup and, in that title run. So it's I would be surprised if they didn't find a way to fit Inoka in.
Yeah.
But it'll have to be at the expense of Achini Kulasurya, I feel, at this point. And in that case, Hasini Pereira probably makes way for Ama Kanchana, who will bat at 7. But I mean, like Nick said, those top 4 are going to have to make like 90% of the runs, right? Because that's where the form has been, um, and where all the success has come from over the last couple of years.
Hey, don't forget Inoshi's boundaries at the end of that match, because those were brilliant.
It was Sugantika, right?
Oh, it was Sugandhaka, right? Oh, right, it was Sugandhaka. That's right. That's right. That's right. I was gonna say, so given the spin-friendly conditions, given that Sri Lanka is going to be playing its games in Sharjah, where they kind of have a lot of happy memories. Nick, how do you see this squad? And we'll talk more about this in detail coming up in the weeks to come. How do you think this squad lines up in this sort of group of death that they're in with New Zealand, Australia, um, Pakistan, and who is the
India.
fifth team that I'm forgetting right now?
India.
India.
And
Um,
India. Yes, India. That's right.
Look, it's not easy to rank this. I mean, I think that you'd have to be uh, really optimistic to say anything other than India and Australia are the top 2 seeds. As you say, Dom, the spinning conditions, I think, does slightly throw a little spanner into that works. And it feels to me like the kind of group where everyone can take games off everyone. Like we were talking about the fact that New Zealand are a better side than they have been. Pakistan aren't bad either. So I mean, I think that we're going to see a lot of close games. I don't think we're going to see blowouts. I think really it's that second game Sri Lanka have got against Australia that's the crucial one, right? And if they can nick that, then I would I would hope to say that they're through to the semi-finals, but you just never know. I don't know. I think my prediction is probably that Sri Lanka will finish third in this group, but I wouldn't be surprised if they finish in the top 2. We saw how Ireland went really toe-to-toe with them in a series, so you've got to say if they come away losing 4 games, it's a possibility, right? I mean, we'd hate to see it, but I don't think you can rule that out either. It seems really well balanced, and I just wish Sri Lanka were in the other side of this tournament.
Yeah,
So
that's
do
the
you?
thing with this
Yeah.
group, right? So, like Nick said, if Sri Lanka win against Australia, it'll be massive. But that doesn't guarantee a semi-final spot either, because they could very well lose to New Zealand or
Yeah.
Pakistan, right? And I think that's the big thing about this group, is that sure, Australia are going to go into every game as favorites, apart from maybe the game against India, where it's probably 50-50, right? India is the same. They're going to go into every game as favorites except for the game against Australia. But if you look at the other three teams, they can beat Australia or India. Like New Zealand could beat India and then lose to Pakistan. Sri Lanka could beat, I know we've never beaten Australia in any format, but I mean, it is possible that they beat Australia and then lose to Pakistan or New Zealand, right? So it's like you have to be on the money every single game, because just like getting a big win is not going to guarantee you a spot. I think that's what's so um, tough about this group. I would very much like to see, and I'm sure there is a proper explanation on how the teams were seeded and how they were grouped. But I would really like to see it, because I mean, Pakistan just took a game from South Africa. Um, and in that group, you would have to say that England obviously favorites, right? England will probably go through as a top seed. But then you've got West Indies and South Africa, who you would imagine that whoever wins that is through,
Hmm.
that game between those two teams, because Bangladesh is a right, I mean, it's an up and coming team, but is not really of that standard where they'll probably challenge one of those teams, unless like there's something crazy happens, like we get a pitch like New York or something. And Scotland is another kind of, I mean, they'll bat well and they'll bowl well, but it's tough to see them beating 3-4 teams in the tournament, right? So
Yeah.
I'd really like to see how the teams are grouped, because it's almost a disservice to both, to the 10 teams, right? Because you want to see the best teams going through to the knockout stages. And I'm not saying that as just a Sri Lankan fan. There's a very real possibility that if New Zealand or Pakistan were in the other group, that they would be contenders to make the semis as well.
I think it's a
So
fair
yeah.
point, because if you were going to seed
Yeah.
these teams, I think most people would probably agree that Bangladesh and Scotland would be seeded 9 and 10, right? And the West Indies would
Yeah,
also
yeah.
probably be one of the lower seeds, 6, 7, 8. So it does seem
Yeah.
like they're
I think
uneven.
the last two seeds, I think it's, in a sense, it's fair, because Sri Lanka and Scotland are the
I,
two teams that
yeah, I
qualified
guess
through
that's
the
true.
qualifiers, right? So fair, that's fair. But like, yeah, it's
But I
very
think also that
interesting.
like actually the kind
Yeah.
of the like free hit element that Sri Lanka are probably feeling is quite beneficial and kind of liberating, right? That you go to the tournament
Mm.
expecting not to make it to the semi-finals, that no one thinks you're going to.
Right.
And so instantly there's kind of like the weight of pressure is taken off your shoulders, and you can go and have a swing and not feel like if you lose the whole country's going to get on your back. I don't know.
but
Yeah.
but I feel like there is the element of things going the other way as well, because they, for the first time, I think they're going into a tournament where people are genuinely expecting them to be contenders for the semis, and they're expecting the games against New Zealand and Pakistan to be kind of foregone
Yeah.
conclusions, right? Whereas Sri Lanka lost to New Zealand like the same tour where they beat them for the first time. They lost the series, and they've lost to Pakistan a couple of times. Even the Asia Cup game that Sri Lanka won, it was that
Very cool.
those couple of
Yeah.
boundaries right at the end that got them over the line. So none of the games are going to be walkovers, right? So it'll be interesting actually how they handle it mentally, because they're come the f- we saw, if I can draw the parallel between the men's team just after the Asia Cup, right, winning that 2022 Asia Cup and then traveling to Australia for
Yeah.
the World Cup. It was like the highest of highs, and then they totally, they were a blowout at that World Cup, right? They lost to Namibia in their first game. You
Yeah.
know, it was all downhill. So it's very interesting to see how mentally they will handle it, because they've never had that success before, right? So, and suddenly they come into a tournament where people are genuinely talking about, okay, I'm sure teams would have done plenty of like analysis on the Sri Lankan team. I don't know if that would have been the case maybe at the last World Cup.
Yeah, absolutely. I think two things I'll add on to this. One, given the strength of the pool, it's obvious that they need to move to a much bigger World Cup format in the future. I know
Yeah.
they're going to 16 teams in 2030, but teams like Ireland should absolutely be
Mm.
playing in this World Cup. Very, very good squad. And
Even
I think that,
UAE, right? Because
yeah,
like UAE almost knocked Sri Lanka out in that qualifier tournament.
yeah,
So I think 14 teams is even a possibility with the women.
yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of good sides that can be in or should be in, and then of course hosting,
Mm.
right when you have a free spot for a host out of 10, that's a very significant portion too. So I'm hoping they expand that, and they will expand that. I think in 2030. Um, but the other thing I wanted to add is the toss is going to be a huge factor.
Yeah.
As we know from playing at Sharjah, chasing is what you want to be doing. Playing in the UAE, chasing is what you want to be doing. So I can see how that could potentially play into Sri Lanka's hand, because they are a chasing team, right? They will want, like, if they're given the option, again, parallels to 96, if they're given the option, they're going to want to
Mm.
chase, right? So that may benefit them as well, so that the natural strategy plays into the plan that they're comfortable with. So that's something that I'll be curious to see how it plays out and how teams play it. Um, okay, so anything else anyone want to add about that before we move on to talk about the ongoing test?
Yeah, I was gonna say like Sri Lanka playing. How many games are they playing in the evening? They're playing two in the evening and two in the morning. So dew will also probably be
Yeah,
a factor, right?
because
That's one
Yeah,
big
the
reason why
last
you
World Cup
want.
there, where there were a lot of those evening games, and basically every game was won by the chasing side.
Yeah,
chasing team.
I
Yep,
think
yep.
same thing with the Asia Cup, right? Like Sri Lanka, the final was the only time where the chasing team lost, if I'm not mistaken.
Hmm.
So toss is going to be massive. Um, and I think by now everybody knows that Sri Lanka wants to chase, right? So that's
Yeah,
going to be another concern, because any team that's winning the toss against Sri Lanka is going to want to put them into bat first.
yeah. So it'll be really interesting. And again, more content is coming as we ramp up to this very exciting World Cup. Um, But we're also in the weird circumstance where we're actually recording in the middle of the test. Um, Sri Lanka and New Zealand are playing at Galle right now. They have a rest day tomorrow on Saturday for the Sri Lankan presidential election, which we will not be covering on this podcast. But there's a rest day. So we are at the end of the third day's play. The test sits very nicely poised. I would say
Mm.
all three results are available at the moment. Sri Lanka are batting in the third innings. They're 237 for four. They currently have a lead of 202 runs. Um, Nick, I'll come to you first. Tell me your thoughts on the first 3 days of play. There's been a lot going on. Um, what have you noticed? What
Wow,
stood
it's
out to you?
been, I mean, a topsy-turvy 3 days again, right? So many throughout this test, I guess WinViz or whatever you want to call it has been bouncing around
Yeah,
wildly. It's gone from New Zealand in control to Sri Lanka in total control and back again. I mean, I guess the first thing to touch on is Kaminda Mendes again. What an incredible start he's had to his test career right now. Hundreds in three different countries, hundreds in his first matches against Bangladesh, against England, against New Zealand, to go with a 50 against in his first match against Australia. He just looks incredibly comfortable, right? And now it's getting to the stage where once he gets to 30, you're already thinking towards three figures, and he looks like he's just bedding in. And there really doesn't seem to be much weakness to his game. I think the one area where he's kind of prone to getting out is nicking off outside, off stump, but it's hard to call that a weakness because he scores so many boundaries, right?
Yeah.
So, it's just the fact of playing. Those are the balls that he likes to play, and occasionally you'll nick one. But it was another superb innings. And I mean, he dug Sri Lanka out of trouble, really, didn't he? Because it looked like, I don't know what they were on that. It
yeah,
seems like a long time ago, day one, but what were they when he came to the crease at, 60 for three or something? And then wickets kept kind of falling. I mean, I was super impressed with Will O'Rourke in that first innings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know a lot about him coming into the series. I actually thought that Matt Henry was going to play ahead of him.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
The Yorker to get past them, some of the swing that he was extracting, the bounce. He got one ball, I think, to Kusal Mendes to leap off a length. Shout out to Kusal Mendes. I feel a bit vindicated here because I've been
Yeah.
saying that number 7 is where he should bat for a long time. I thought he looked really, really great. Very unlucky the way he got out with the ball bouncing off short leg. It's like it's a typical Kusal. Why always me? Why the guy can't catch a break? But great catch as well to get rid of. I think it was Kane Williamson yesterday.
Williamson, yeah.
Yes. Oh, yeah. That
I
was
mean,
brilliant.
look, the
Yeah.
bowling yesterday was worrying, right? I want to ask you guys whether the fact that Prabha and Ramesh came back today and did a good job getting those last 6 wickets kind of negates what we saw yesterday and the worry of, I mean, Prabha, I think, bowled 33 overs yesterday and looked really ineffective. He got 1 wicket, but I can't remember. There was another one that was review overturned. But apart from that, I don't remember him creating that many chances. I thought that he bowled badly in the last test that he played at Lords. I thought he was out bowled there by Shoaib Malik, not Shoaib Malik, Shoaib Bashir, sorry, quite widely out bowled by Shoaib Bashir. And again, yesterday, like, the consistency that we're used to seeing from him, that like being able to
Yeah.
put the ball on a spot just seemed to go missing yesterday. He was spraying it. And when you're a bowler like Prabhat who doesn't look to turn every ball, who bowls a lot of arm balls and who then turns the occasional one and who isn't getting big turn all the time, you can't afford to be all over the place. With Ramesh Mendes, at least in recent times, you kind of know that's what you're going to get from him, right? That you get a bit more of that he'll bowl good balls, but he will give you bad balls. But yeah, to see Prabhat bowling so many bad balls or just struggling to keep a decent grouping was a little bit worrying. And he bowled a lot better this morning, which was great to see. I don't know if you guys agree. I thought Asitha was maybe a bit under bowled yesterday. I don't know. I feel sorry. I'm ranting here. I'm going on for about 10 minutes. I wonder if Dhananjay's captaincy is a little
No.
bit. If he could be a bit more proactive when things aren't happening, and that he just kind of thinks we'll keep going and we'll plug away and a wicket will fall eventually. But yeah, props to the way that Sri Lanka got themselves back into the test this morning. And I thought that Dimuth and Chandimal batted beautifully. Low risk on a pitch that was not easy, that was turning. They were really judicious in their approach. Not a lot of boundaries, but they ticked singles. They kept the scoreboard turning. Chandi was really active with the sweeps and the reverses and using his feet. And they batted Sri Lanka into a really good position. It was then disappointing to see soft wickets fall in the bundle. But yeah, Dhananjaya and dug us out of that hole, right? And now I think that Sri Lanka are in a pretty good position. If they can put on another 150, I think they'll feel like they're in the box seat. But Dom, you said it, I think, in our text group that we've got a lot of good batters, but not a great batter at the moment. This issue of batters getting in and then getting out could potentially be something that costs Sri Lanka, because, I mean, if someone had gone on and got 100 here out of that top 5, then you'd think Sri Lanka were really in a position of sort of real strength, right? But as it stands, if we come back on Sunday and New Zealand pick up 2-3 wickets in those first 10 overs, that cracks the game wide open again, right?
Yeah. On that point about good players versus great players, and I think, Estelle, you tweeted about this too with Dinesh Chandimal. There's no doubt that Dimuth, Angie, and Chandi are all good test players. They've scored runs everywhere. They can adapt to different conditions. But when you look at their record, right, and you compare these guys to the Roots, the Williamsons, the Smiths, the Kohlis, one thing that's lacking is that conversion rate. So Dimuth Karunaratne, right, who rightly we think is one of the best openers in the world right now, he scored 1600s and 38 50s. Angie has scored 1600s and 42 50s. Chandimal has scored 1500s and 28 50s. right? So all a lot more 50s, right? In excess of 2 to 1 than hundreds. But when you look at Steve Smith, he's got 32 hundreds and 34 50s. When you look at Virat Kohli, he's got 29 hundreds and 30 50s. Kane Williamson, right, who we're dealing with right now, he's got 32 hundreds and 34 50s. So that ratio is a lot closer to 1 than it is to 1 to 2. So instead of getting out for 80, those guys are going on to make 110, 120, 130. And that adds significant value because that adds another, not just 50 runs to the total score, but 70, 80, 90, however many their partner
Mm.
provides, right? And so you're going from a position where you score, say, 300, 305 to a position where you're looking more like 400, right? And that puts a lot more pressure on the team coming in and batting. So I think that's one area where I think the younger batters are really going to look to improve upon. Once you get in, you got to get that 100 more often than not if you can. And Kamindu has shown a capability of doing that so
Yeah.
far, but again, long career to go. Potham, again, someone who has a great conversion rate in one day cricket. So we'll see what happens. Estelle, anything you wanted to add on to what Nick said about the first 3 days play? And then I've got a couple specific things I want to touch on.
Yeah, I think Kamindo Mendes was obviously the big story, right? The way he batted, um, and it's just with guys like him, I think it also comes down to form. Is that they look like they have all the time in the world to play the ball, right? And that's what was really impressive about him. I mean, Angelo could not handle O'Rourke's bowling, right? He couldn't handle the pace. He was struggling, got hit on the finger, and then that made things worse once he came back. But Kamindo looked like he was in control all the time, and I think that's I mean really obviously great signs for Sri Lanka. Kusal Mendes is I mean, is it too early to say that this could be like the 2.0 Kusal Mendes in Test cricket, because it does seem like he looked a lot more comfortable. Number three is not an easy place to bat, right? And we've discussed this in the previous pods as well about how if you look around the world, you've got Kane Williamson, who is a great number three, but apart from that, not a lot of batters are having a good time in that position, right? So, which is why I think, you know, I've spoken about like why isn't Chandimal coming up the order, and them not take the seniors not taking that responsibility. But I think it's great to see from him, right, coming in at number three. It's easier to bat at five, right?
Yeah.
But coming in early and putting all those partnerships, um, I think also when you talk about great batters and the difference between good and great batters, and talking about this squad, I think if you look at the England series and this test, Dinesh Chandimal, Dhananjay De Silva, Angelo Matthews, and in this test, Dimuth Karunaratne, between them should have had at least 300s, right? Instead, they have zero. They've got in and they've got out. They've not managed to push on from the good starts they've gotten. And I think it's particularly important to think about Dimuth because opening isn't easy, right? That's the toughest time to bat, facing the new ball. But he has got starts and he's done like the hardest part of the innings, and then he's let himself down in his 70s and 80s, which
Mm.
I think should be something that they discuss, and it should be a concern. If I'm not mistaken, Sana Jayasuriya was also asked about it, and he did say like this 50s, they don't make an impact to anyone, right? But 100 would make a massive impact on, like you said, Dom. It's not just you getting those remaining 20 or 30 runs, it's your partner also getting runs, and that adds a huge amount to the end total, right? um, which is why I shared with you guys Aravinda De Silva's record, and how from 97 onwards he's when people like that's the period where people really recognized him as a great batter, is when he basically flipped the 50s and hundreds, right? So he had let me just see that. So Aravinda had 13 50s and 800s from 85 to 1985 to 1996. So 13 and 8, From 97 to 2002, he had 12 and 9. So he had 1200s and 950. So he basically flipped that around. And that's the era where, people just recognized him as a great batter because he was able to convert those. How many times do you see a 50 being a match winning 50 unless it comes from a lower order batter, right? You don't really see that. So I think it's definitely something that like the batters will be working on because I mean these guys have been playing for years, for a decade plus. They know the things they need to work on. But overall I think if Sri Lanka in a tricky situation because like Nick mentioned, a couple of wickets in the first 10 overs of day 4 and the narrative completely changes and New Zealand are back on top because you've seen Sri Lanka kind of lose a couple of wickets together a lot during this test, so that'll be a massive concern for them. I also wonder actually what the break is going to do to the pitch because you would
Yeah.
expect that the natural deterioration that you would see throughout the course of a 5-day test wouldn't happen now that you have a day in between that basically you're not playing on that track.
Yeah. I think one thing, just to pick up on the point about converting 50s to 100s, Dinesh Chandimal got out flicking to a leg slip, which he also got out to in England, right? So if teams are going to be able to bring around a leg slip when you're in and get you out that way, that's about you and not about, that's about your mentality and not about any technical skill that you lack, right? So that's something where you should be able to say, okay, they brought in a leg slip, I'm not going to play that shot anymore. Especially when you played 150 balls, right? There are other ways to score, there are other ways that you can go about doing things. So that's one thing that was kind of frustrating. I think I want to go back and talk about the bowling a bit, right? So frequently it's been Galle has been a three spinner pitch at times, right? I remember when they had Dilruwan, Lakshan Sandakan, and Rangana Herath, and sort of on the back of a very strong series against England, they decided to play two seamers, Asitha and Lahiru Kumara. What did you and I think Nick, you alluded to this. Can you expand a little bit more on how you think DDS handled the bowling changes and handled the fact that he had Asatha and Lahiro in his squad, but they only bowled, between them 20 overs,
Yeah,
I
I
think.
mean, I found that strange. Just to build on what you guys were saying, I totally agree on this 50s to 100s issue. And it's, we talked about this turn to leg slip. We've seen it over and over again, right? Dhananjaya, day one at Old Trafford, Patham at Lords. We also saw at Lords
Yeah.
like Angelo get in the second innings and then cloth one against the spin to mid off. And like these are really bad dismissals and they're nothing to do with technical issues or someone getting you out. It's you getting yourself out because you've basically got bored and done something stupid. And Sri Lanka, playing against teams where they're battling for wins can't afford to do that. So that's something that they can cut out quite easily. And brain fades do happen, but really at the top level they shouldn't be happening as often as we've seen them in the past few weeks. But sorry, back to the question at hand, Dom. I just felt like yesterday there were 2 long periods where nothing much was going, and DDS was kind of just happy to plug in Prabha from one end and Ramesh from the other, and not do an awful lot. Asika bowled 7 overs in that whole innings. Like,
Yeah.
weren't there times we saw like Willow Rook get some real variable bounce, right? It wasn't there, especially those moments because there were big partnerships. Who was it? Was it Latham and Williamson who mounted a really big partnership where it looked like Sri Lanka just weren't going to take a wicket? Was there a chance there to bring Asitha on? Maybe just have him bowl like 2 overs of short stuff with a couple men back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then ultimately the change came when DDS came on, right? When he brought himself onto bowl and
Yeah.
he looked more threatening and like he could actually kind of group the ball better than the other two, which is really worrying. I think DDS has captained well at times since he's taken over, but I think there are also times when he's just slipped slightly into too much of a passive mindset. And I always remember, like, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that I could captain this side and that I'm a great tactician. But I always remember speaking to Mahela when I was writing my book, and he said, I've never wanted to let the game drift. If anyone came to me with an idea, whether it was a good idea or whether it wasn't a good idea, let's just try something. Let's keep things moving. And I mean, I'm not talking about, like a ball goes through third slip, so you move a fielder there. But you've got to be playing with the batsman, right? If nothing's happening, you've got to be doing stuff to try and get them out. And they did that well. At the Oval, we saw it, like with Harry Brook, right? They came in with a clear plan that they were going to have those two men in the covers, strangle him outside off, and make him play that full shot. And that was a great example of Sri Lanka like manufacturing a wicket. And I just felt like that wasn't there yesterday.
Do they need a chat with Malinga again?
I mean, let's get him in full time. He needs to be there with his whiteboard on the sidelines, cooking up plans all day long, I reckon.
I was going to say, go ahead, Estelle.
Yeah, I was going to say that Ramesh Mendis is really becoming more and more of a concern, right? Like that second spinner spot. Because how long is Sri Lanka going to have to kind of tolerate the fact that he's not consistent, that he can't keep the ball in one spot, right? He's had a terrible run of things over the last couple of years, and it does seem like there's a technical problem. It's nothing. It's not that he's a bad bowler. We saw when he came into the side how good he could be, but it feels like there is a technical problem there, and how long are they going to be working on it? Because it's to me it's very concerning if you look at the test side or the test kind of who you would consider test players. There aren't that many spinning options, right? Like, I mean, Jeffrey Van der Sar is in the squad because of that, because they don't really see that many kind of spinners waiting in the wings to get in. So that, I think it has got to be something they're thinking about
and
right
also,
now.
like, Ramesh's USP, right, is the fact that he gets big turn. But on a wicket like this, like Glenn Phillips is getting the ball to rag miles. So that's kind of negated, right? And the fact that he can't consistently hit a spot becomes more of an issue. I mean, I don't know if you guys agree, but maybe like this lineup would look better balanced with DDS bowling more overs and then Vander's in there as a kind of X factor option who can turn the ball both ways. I mean, because you do need an off spinner with how many left-handers they've got, but I'm not sure that Ramesh is consistently. Like, I just felt a lot yesterday that like New Zealand shouldn't have been scoring at 4 and over or whatever they were, and looking like they weren't going to get out as much as they did. Like, it shouldn't. I've just felt like the complexion of the game yesterday shouldn't have looked like it did.
Yeah. And we've seen this before as well, right? Where the first 50 overs or so, they're not, like, the spinners are not effective at all. And then they do make a comeback. Like today they were good, right? But the damage that needs to be done is done.
Yeah.
New Zealand were 250 for 4 at the end of yesterday's play, right? So they were already, 60 runs away from Sri Lanka's total. So if they had bowled better yesterday, then possibly that the 340 they got wouldn't have been 340. It would have probably been about 280. So that's my big concern. It's not like, okay, second innings he might come back and take 5 wickets, right? It could happen. He's that type of bowler who suddenly turns up. Yeah. But performing early in the test is really important, and you can't have like 60-70 overs where you aren't able to penetrate at all. You can't give those periods away to opposing teams, particularly in this kind of Sri Lanka still. I mean, it's far fetched, but Sri Lanka is still in the race for the World Test Championship final, right? So, I mean, you can't afford to have 60 overs where you're not good.
Yeah.
And to come back to the point on Asitha, right? Isn't he Sri Lanka's best exponent of reverse swing?
I was going to say, Will O'Rourke got plenty of reverse swing, right?
And so did Saudi, right? So why wasn't he bowling more? That's a question.
Yeah, I think especially later, as your spinners get tired in those, towards the end of the day, right? That a 3-4 over spell of reverse swing, can be deadly, especially if there's been a 30 over period where they're only facing spin, right? So that ability to adjust to, oh wait, what am I seeing? What pace is it coming? I think there's also, this is a small thing that irritated me, when they had the new ball today, they gave Kamindu Mendes the new
Mm,
ball, and it's just, and I think every so often they just feel like, okay, we'll give him the ball, and he just gets smashed around. um, and this happened in England too, where they seem to be bowling well, they seem to have an idea, and then pressure's totally let off. And I get, part timers can sometimes get you wickets, but with the new ball and you have two good fast bowlers, you absolutely want them to be taking advantage of any
mm.
swing on offer, any movement on offer. Um, yeah, I think last comment that I want to make before I'll ask the final question for today is to pick up on Kusal Mendes. He just looks so much more free batting at
Mm.
seven. You didn't see the pressure, right? The weight of the world. Oh my gosh, I'm on three. I have to survive this new ball spell, and then I have to score runs. His natural game was there. He was sweeping. And, you saw how effective he was against those spinners. He basically gave them no room to breathe at all. Right. And having a player like that who's disruptive and active at number seven will be huge for the guys batting above him as well. Right. Having someone who is troublesome to bowl to, and then they can kind of get on and carry on and score their hundreds if they can. Okay, so Nick already alluded to this. What do Sri Lanka need to post in order to beat New Zealand? Estelle, I'll come to you first.
I actually think, given the fact that there is a rest day and the pitch was playing, I mean, there weren't that many issues, right, today. I think to feel safe, they'll want something close to 400. I don't know how realistic it is to expect them to get there, because they've basically got Angie and DDS plus Kusal Mendis to come, and to be honest, we're not expecting much from from the bowlers, right? Um, so I think, to obviously, to feel safe, they would want about 400. It all depends on how the pitch turns out as well, right? Because we've seen with Galle, if I recall, it was the second test against Australia in 2022, where within a session it seemed like
Yeah,
the entire surface kind of changed, right? And suddenly the ball was spitting off just a good length, and ball was doing a lot. um, so I wonder if something like that is in store. If not, the way Sri Lanka bowled in that first innings, a, even a total of 300, I think is chaseable,
yeah,
given that, the pitch should have had some time to settle on day four, on what should have been day four. And then, New Zealand batted quite well, I thought, in the first innings, even though they also were guilty of some soft dismissals, right? So, um, I think it'll take a really good bowling effort. We are so used to that time where, even a 250 against
yeah.
Rangana and Dilruwan would have been easily a winning total, because they
150,
won't
right?
they wouldn't give anything away,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But I mean, again, like I said before, Ramesh and Prabhat could come out and pick up 5 wickets each,
yeah,
and egg on our faces. But
yeah.
I think they'll need a pretty big total to feel safe.
Yeah, I think it's
Nick?
really difficult to tell. And as Estelle touched on, the rest day is going to play a role and what that does to the pitch. I don't, um, I think there's a possibility that they could defend 260, but like Estelle says, I think they'll want a lot more than that to feel comfortable. And I think that probably the conversation is 350 plus. That let's
Mm.
try and add what the lead is now, 202. So if they can add another 150, I think that they'll feel like they really should win the game from there. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this pitch degrades. I mean, we have seen at points in this game sharp turn and bounce, but it hasn't seemed to
Yeah.
degrade a massive amount. Like, it didn't look to be playing a lot worse today than it was on day one. It's going to be a fascinating conclusion to the test. I think it's certainly going to day 5, right? Unless something crazy happens on Sunday. Of course, it's really important that everyone has the opportunity to vote. But I think that could have waited till Monday. Sri Lanka could have had a national holiday on Monday, and we could have been given our full weekend of cricket. Because us working folks who are trying to juggle the crap we have to do in the week with watching a whole day of Test cricket would have loved to have 2 days where we could have watched the thrilling conclusion to this Test. But so it goes. Yeah, I'll be looking forward to Sunday morning.
Actually,
Yeah,
just to add, like, to speak about the inconsistencies, is that, like Nick mentioned, they could probably defend 260, but you
yeah,
wouldn't be surprised if they
Yeah,
conceded
no,
350
exactly.
also, because that's how, like, up and down they've been, right? So, like, it's very realistic. Like, you can imagine them defending 260 as well. Like, they could both have a really good day. Maybe Asita has a good day, Lairu has a good day, but at the same time they could concede like 320, 350 as well. So it'll all come down to, I guess, the way they bowl, and if they can get things right away in the
And
second
I think we
innings.
should say actually before we wrap up
yeah,
that we have been a little harsh, haven't we? But we're nitpicking about this team. But the overall trend is like upwards, and this side is in a
Good.
much better
Yes.
state than it was
yeah.
a year ago. And to potentially win back-to-back games against really good England and New Zealand sides shows that Sri Lanka's in a pretty good place, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point there, right? That we're being critical. Some of that is bad memories. Like I'm thinking of the 2022 loss to Pakistan at Galle where they
Mhm.
chased 342. But I do think that this is a better side. I do think that they've shown really good signs. And I should also add that I think the future is pretty bright. Shout out to the men's A team, which won the second test and won the series against South Africa in South Africa, and there were some big time performances. Isitha Wijasundra again,
Mm.
leading bowler. Pasindu Surya Bandara had a great innings in the first innings, and then we had a match inning knock from Pawan Ratnayaka. I
Mm.
think it was 116 off of 67, an absolutely blazing knock to take them over the finish line. So as we talked about last time, a lot of bright talent in that A squad. So even as the seniors get older, we do have some people who we can bring in the future and who look really, really exciting. Anyone have any comments about the A team? And particularly for me, that the standout was Pawan Ratnayaka's knock.
Yeah, that was amazing, right? In a potentially tricky chase to go out and smoke 7 sixes and just like completely
Yeah.
change the face of it. And as you said, Dom, it's nice that there are now several guys who can slot into those roles and who you really feel you want to see playing for Sri Lanka sooner rather than later, right? I think Pasindu
Yeah.
is, another a guy who's averaging 50 plus in first class cricket, and people have been skeptical about those numbers, but given how well Kamindu and Patham have
Mm.
adapted to Test cricket, I think that narrative's slightly changing, and he's someone who we want to see sooner rather than later. So yeah, it's really exciting. We touched on the fact, didn't we, before we came on, that Lahira Udara is someone who can keep wicket as well. Nuanadu is also a guy who, I mean, doesn't necessarily have the numbers that you want to see for coming into Test cricket, but just looks amazing. So yeah, I mean, at the
Mm-hmm.
start of the summer, I remember someone asking me who was going to jump into those slots when Ange, Chandy, and Dimwithal went, and I said, I've got no idea. And now it feels like there's a much clearer succession plan, which is really encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, Dom, you mentioned this, and you actually got a like from Mahela as well when you mentioned it about the pathways that he had set. And I think these are the rewards we're seeing, right? For those pathways, Sri Lanka doing much more A tours than a lot of other teams around the world, right? If you look across the board, men, women, under 19s, they're doing a lot of series overseas, which is only bound, it's bound to, give us good results, right? Because you're going to have these players who you see as the future getting that exposure that you need. Guys like, I think the next line is probably Lahiru Udara, Pasindu Surya Bandara. Pawan Ratnaik has actually been surprisingly quite good, like, in the sense,
Yeah.
you know you don't necessarily see him as a test player, right? The way he's played in list A cricket, a lot of hundreds over the last couple of months, but he's been impressive. Nuanidu, as you said, very promising player, and the bowlers as well, right? Eshan Malinga is another guy who is probably, a future player for Sri Lanka. So I think we should also applaud the kind of setup that's been put into place. The NSL is another thing. Maybe these are the results of those tournaments, like, because we've had the NSL
Yeah.
now for I think 3 seasons, and you're having the best players playing the best in a small tournament where you really get some good competition. So I think people also need to understand that it's not just the national team's performances. Actually, what reflects a healthy system is
Mhm.
the bench guys doing well, right? What do they do in the A team? What's happening with the emerging side under 19? And we're seeing a lot of good players coming through those lines, and that's really encouraging to see. I know, like, um, we've been critical of Sri Lanka cricket as well, right? And that's been one of the biggest factors for something that's limited Sri Lanka, the players, right? But you have to give credit, I think, over the last couple of years, just those plans that have been put into place, those little adjustments, hiring some very impressive names for the high performance center, right? Where you have this next generation of players coming through. Those are the things that we're seeing rewarded. And as Nick mentioned, right, like that reluctance to give any importance to first class averages from Sri Lankan batters is no longer there, because you're seeing like guys like Kamindu Pathum getting runs in the national side against, and no one can say, oh, they got it against Bangladesh or Zimbabwe or Ireland or
Yeah.
Afghanistan, right? They've got Kamidu and Pathum have got runs against England, and Kamidu obviously has got runs against New Zealand in this test as well. So I think it's a very hopeful time for Sri Lanka cricket, particularly I would say in the test batting arena, right? Because
Yeah.
like really promising players in the wings. I still think like they need a couple of players like Chandimal, maybe Dimut, to hang around a bit longer, because
Yeah.
there's going to have to be that kind of nurturing and mentoring for some of the players that come through as well. But again, promising signs for Sri Lanka.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, and I think it's the health of a side isn't its best 11, but the
Mm.
best 22, right? The fact that there's someone who can come in and do a decent job when someone gets hurt. I mean, we've seen that with the best sides in the world. How many times has an Australian quick who's never bowled before come over and just dominate it, right? So I'm really excited to see that. Also, in addition to the test batting stocks, I think our general pace bowling stocks just look
Mm.
way more robust than they had. And I think we should also point out that there's multiple pathways. So we have the NSL, we have the A team tours, we have the under 19 tours, but now the foreign leagues that our players can go play
Mm.
in, right? Venezuela, Alage, Mahesh Deekshana, Wanindu can all go and ply their trade all around the world against the best players in the world. And that helps them to adapt and change to be the best players that they can. So I think it's a really bright time right now. I think the last 10 years have been a bit of a dark decade, but I think some shining lights are starting to come through. Anyways, shall we wrap it up there, guys? Um, if you've been listening to all nearly 1 hour of this, please give us a like, subscribe, comment on whatever platform you're listening to. Make sure to subscribe to the newsletter, and we will be back soon with more Sri Lanka cricket news. All right, bye.